Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our third event in celebration of mamas, martyrs, and Jezebels, myths, legends, and other lies you've been told about Black women. I'm going to hold up the anthology. Mamas, martyrs, and Jezebels, myths, legends, and other lies you've been told about Black women revisits notions of Black womanhood to include the ways in which Black women's perceived strength can function as a dangerous denial of Black women's humanity. This collection addresses the stigma of this extraordinary endurance in professional and personal spaces, the Black church, in interpersonal partnerships, and within the justice arena, while also giving voice and value to Black women's experiences as the backbone of the Black family and community. In this event, contributors to the section of the book dedicated to the theme Soul will discuss their work. Our moderator is Dr. Andrea Mattis, who wrote the introduction to the section and who is one of the anthology's editors. Dr. Mattis has a career focused on the intersection of Black women and God. She is an assistant professor of English at Albany State University, where she teaches a myriad of courses, including composition, seminars on Toni Morrison, Black women writers, and so on. Dr. Mattis is a two-time graduate of Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University in Tallahassee, Florida, where she holds a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature and a Master of Education in Secondary Education / English Education. She also earned her PhD in English Literature from the University of South Florida and has taken courses in Black theology, Black homiletics, and both the Old and New Testaments at Bethune-Cookman University. Her ongoing academic research focuses on how Black Christian women achieve self-definition, and her popular writing addresses Black women who are, please pardon the acronym, SINK, so sinking, which means single income with no kids, but not drowning. Dr. Mattis is also a licensed minister in the Baptist Church who loves social justice, gender equality, womanist theology, and critical engagement with the Word of God. Our panelists, who are also contributors to the anthology, are Olivia Brown, Esperanza Cintron, Dr. Chris Omni, and Margaret Scott. I'll be pulling and reading their bios from the anthology. Olivia Brown, she, her, is a multi-hyphenate writer, podcast host, artist, activist, and dreamer from Miami, Florida, and based in Chicago, Illinois. Her work spans genres and mediums with the goal of making freedom, especially for Black queer femmes, tangible by way of pleasure, self-exploration, ancestral veneration, shadow work, social justice, and intercommunal care. Olivia's work often finds its legs in Afrofuturism and nudges her audience to live their radicalized future into existence. Outside of her work, Olivia rests frequently, dreams often, and enjoys spending time in nature and good company. Our next panelist is Esperanza M. Cintron. Esperanza Cintron is the author of Shades, Detroit Love Stories, published by Wayne State University Press. It was a 2020 Michigan Notable Book. Her books of poetry include Visions of a Post-Apocalyptic Sunrise, the Naomi Long Magid Award winner, What Keeps Me Sane, and Chocolate City Latina. Boulders, Detroit Nature Poems, published by Chestnut Review in 2023, is her most recent collection. Her work is anthologized in Manteca, an anthology of Afro-Latinx poets, Abandoned Automobile, of Burgers and Barrooms, Double Stitch, and others. She was a Callaloo Writing Fellow at Brown and Oxford universities. She's won a Michigan Council for the Arts Individual Artist Grant and was a founder of the Sisters of Color Writers Collective and editor of its literary journal, Seeds. Our next panelist is Dr. Chris Omni. Dr. Omni is an eco-spiritualist, two-time TED speaker, Black women's health researcher, published author, internationally recognized poet, and presenter and documentary filmmaker. Dr. Omni holds a bachelor's degree in human services, 2 master's degrees in public health and liberal arts, and a doctoral degree from FSU, Florida State University, where she researched Black joy in green spaces through the methodologies of autoethnography and visual narrative inquiry. Dr. Omni values the unapologetic use of her voice and agency to speak life, love, and light to all people, with a particular emphasis on Black people. She views her body as a vessel that has not only delivered life, but receives life in the form of lessons and abilities from the ancestors. As others have stated, Chris is a whole vibe. Our final panelist is Margaret Scott. Margaret Ann Gathers Scott served as a public school educator and librarian for 39 years. She's now involved in life story capture as a family historian, speaker, lecturer, workshop facilitator, obituary writer, and certified guided autobiography instructor. She is the vision behind FamilyHistoryPlace.com. Margaret's first book, I Come from Bowman Lane, a family history memoir, and a companion volume, Mother Dear, The Life and Times of Nettie Maria Ford Gathers, were published in 2023. Both are available at dldbooks.com/mgscott. Margaret lives in the South Carolina Lowcountry on land acquired by her maternal great-grandparents within 5 years after the Civil War ended. We'll head off our program today with an initial reading and introduction by Dr. Mattis. Then each panelist will read sections from their works in the anthology. Then we'll get to the discussion portion of today's events. As always, Audience members are encouraged to join the discussion using the chat function. Audience members are also urged to mute their mics so we can have seamless conversation and few interruptions. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Mattis for today's program.
Greetings. Hi, everybody. Welcome. It's so good to be in this space, in this room with you all, having a conversation about Black women's souls and the way in which we seek to satisfy and secure those souls. The ways we find joy, the ways we find peace, the ways that we take care of ourselves, especially in a world that could honestly care less about us except for the production of our bodies. So, as long as we are productive, we are useful. And when we cease production, we seem to be discarded. But here we are in a place where we are reclaiming what is rightfully ours, and that is our souls, ourselves, and the care of those selves. So I want to start with a reading, of course, from my section, and then the genesis of this particular project. So my note is called Securing a Soft Life on Black Women and the Soul. Monday through Friday, I'm a Black girl professional with meetings and manuscripts and obligations and responsibilities. Someone, somewhere, always seems to need something. On the weekends, though, I can be free. I can be me. I can be soft. Black girls deserve soft lives. When I imagine a soft life, I think about a moment in Toni Morrison's first novel, The Bluest Eye. We see a now adult Black woman, Claudia McTeer, thinking back to her childhood. On Christmas Day, she desired to experience things, to feel something. She didn't want to unwrap blonde haired, blue eyed dolls. She would need to feed, clothe, change, and then admire. She did not desire responsibility. Instead, Claudia wanted to sit on her grandmother's stool and have her grandfather play his violin for her alone. Then the taste of a peach, perhaps, afterward. This is the soft life. Perhaps she already knew she would one day be the de facto head of household. Perhaps she knew she would need to cook and clean and care for everyone while neglecting herself. Perhaps she already knew her life would one day not be her own. And maybe she just wanted a few more years to be the object of care and not the caretaker. I get that because the soft life, it's what I desire, it's what I admire, it's what I require, even if it's only on the weekends. This section of Mamas, Martyrs, and Jezebels looks at how we do soul work, how we prioritize our voices, our needs, our lives, and ourselves, how we seek softness in a world that can feel much too hard. So let's talk Genesis. When doctors West White, Youssef, and Boulware and I developed this project, we considered the spaces or arenas in which Black women have trouble defining themselves for themselves. As Audre Lorde would tell us, if you don't define yourself for yourself, you'll be crunched into other people's definitions of you and eaten alive. And so we thought about the spaces where Black women are eaten alive. their bodies, their minds, their hearts, their souls. The way in which, for me, the Black church has sought to define who I was without my input and especially without my permission. The way in which, as a Black woman called to ministry, how I've had to struggle against people who didn't believe in me. Literally, they would say that I don't believe in women ministers, as if I were the tooth fairy or Santa Claus or Bigfoot or a unicorn. But quite possibly, I might be a unicorn. So, what do you then do in that world when people tell you what they don't believe, even though you're standing in front of them? And so we sought writers who talked about their experiences in prioritizing their souls, prioritizing themselves, the ways in which we trouble the Black Protestant narrative, the ways in which we trouble Black Christianity, and find God for ourselves, as Intozaki Shange told us, and love her fiercely. So the sections that we're talking about tonight are about Black women who have found a way to love themselves fiercely, authentically, unapologetically, loudly, if I can spoil a little bit of one of the readings in this section. Alternatively, enthusiastically, though, so that we can stand on top of the mountain and know that we've climbed it and know that we owe our success to first our God, second to ourselves, who put one foot in front of the other as we climbed, lifting as we climb. So we'll now hear from our readers, and we're going in alphabetical order, of course, as the sections in the book are also in alphabetical order. And each one of you all has chosen 5 to 7 minutes that you will share from your section. And then, quite possibly, I haven't decided whether or not we're going to do questions at the end of each reading or questions at the end. So let's see how it goes as we play out. Also, thank you so much, everyone, for coming, for spending a Tuesday night at 8 o'clock in the PM. If you are like me, it is near your bedtime. Okay. Okay. I'm not going to tell you all what's happening below what you all can see, but know that it might be a robe. Know that there might be some blanket happening down here. And that is self-care. but, but we will start with Olivia Brown.
Can I go ahead?
Absolutely.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me tonight. Before I get started, I'm going to read a section of my essay called Please Don't Be Disappointed That I Read Tarot, an open letter to my late grandmother. Before I read, though, I do just want to take a second to acknowledge my grandmother. She passed in 2020, and the entire thing is inspired by her. I feel her energy in space, and I'm just so proud to be her granddaughter sharing this. So I feel like I need to explain myself. You taught me everything I know about being a woman, a good Christian woman. You taught me how to serve the Lord through serving others. You taught me how to pray. And I still remember being on my knees saying the Lord's Prayer with you, eyes closed, but still seeing you beam with belief. And the pride of knowing you instilled that belief into me. I owe so much of myself to your lessons. I was blessed to be warmed and molded under your light. Grandma's prayers have kept me in the same way that grandma's hands, anointed with oils and pressed against my forehead, used to heal me when you were here. So I feel like I need to explain to you why I've strayed. As much as I was a believer, I always felt restricted by our religion. When I got older, I learned the words to describe why. Remember how you were always so proud of me for going to school? You'd always tell me that God gave me a beautiful gift, my mind, and I should use it to serve his will. And while that may be true, When I started to learn the why behind the problems my education was supposed to prepare me to fix, I couldn't bring myself to see anything in the same way. Grandma, we weren't poor by chance. We weren't sick because of coincidence. We made do and we made enough change for the next generations to have it that much better, but never the best. We kept on keeping on, but you have to know our problems were always by design, and women like us don't hold those blueprints. Whenever I would get to talking like this, when you were here, you'd always tell me that I worried too much and that I was too smart for my own good. But Grandma, sometimes I think we were too Christian for ours. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with what we've known, but every time I protest in the streets against another slain person who looks like us, it's hard to go back and practice the same religion as the slayer. It's hard not to think about what would be different if certain people never manipulated God's word to force generations to submit to a will that never intended to include them. So when I found tarot, it not only felt right, but it felt like resistance. You always told me to go out and change the world. I can't do that without asking questions of the world and trying something new, depending on the answer. Tarot is my something new. Tarot, hoodoo, and other spiritual practices. And I expect that they wouldn't be that new for you, even though you may see them as witchcraft and because of that, evil and not to be done. I'm sure somewhere in the plains of South Carolina, you heard the vibrations of low country voodoo rattling the grapevine. If you didn't, I know it influenced you just as much as the Bible. I know because I saw. Even if we never addressed it as hoodoo, voodoo, or magic, you lived your life as sort of a root worker yourself. The top of your dresser was an altar, adorned with offerings that kept the spirits in the house alive and well. The dreams you could spend all day on the phone describing, the ancestors were speaking to and through you. You taught me that magic too. So really, Grandma, the only difference is that I choose to name it, acknowledge where it comes from, and practice our magic consciously, out loud, and without fear. You'd be proud to know that tarot has made me a better healer and a better person. I'm better equipped to tackle worldly problems and those that attack our spirit alike. I'm more certain, less worried, more centered, and more in touch with the natural ebbs and flows of life. I remember watching you pray for hours with the church ladies who would visit. It didn't matter the scenario, whether it be an incarcerated son, a new illness you didn't have the money to go to the hospital for, fear about death, fear about life, anything. You all would pray until you were reminded that God's will would be done. I sit with myself or my friends for hours, asking questions to you, God, and whoever else is willing to answer, and making meaning of the cards that come until we are certain of the answers, just the same as you and the other church ladies. See? It's more the same than you know, Grandma, and it's ours, all ours. We don't have to share it with the people who keep us down, and that's freedom. Ain't that what all of this is for anyway? Freedom. I couldn't have imagined this independence using Christianity alone.
Excellent. Excellent job. So I've decided that we're going to do the readings first, and then there will be questions, individual questions still, but individual questions after everyone has had a chance to read. So Esperanza Cintron.
Hello. I don't know. This essay was sort of like a stream of consciousness pulled together kind of thing. So I picked little pieces that I hope will blend. So we'll see how it works. Let me put my readers on. Okay, it's called Why Black Women Talk Loud. I am a loud talking Black woman. Strangers turn and look at me oddly when I'm engaged in conversations with friends, and my only daughter, who is a millennial, often shushes me. There was a period when I felt shame at drawing attention to myself and afraid that I was giving weight to a negative stereotype. But with age comes wisdom, and if wisdom isn't forthcoming, there is certainly the growing disregard for the opinion of others. When I told a friend that I was writing this essay, she sat back with a huff. Clearly offended, she asked, "Isn't that an unfounded stereotype, something made up by white people?" "Well," I said, not sure how to approach her question. "You remember Sapphire's Amos and Andy? In Amos and Andy? That's what I mean," she cut me off. "It's something that white people make up, a character." I couldn't argue with that because Amos and Andy Sapphire was a fishwife who was constantly railing at her con artist husband, Kingfish, two white performers who were obviously influenced by the minstrel tradition, created the radio version, which aired in 1926. I had to ask myself, why do I talk loud? At first, I reasoned that it was because I'm a teacher and often have to raise my voice in order to gain the attention of my students and stimulate their minds. Maybe it's because I'm a woman and as such have historically been denied a voice. So I raise the volume because I'm afraid that if I don't, I'll be dismissed or ignored. Similarly, the voices of Black people have been ignored, and we continue to face the perpetual deaf ear of the powers that govern our lives. Maybe it has something to do with culture or ethnicity, because when in the company of others like ourselves, we don't lower our voices. We shake the outside world off and let loose. We get animated, talk loud, signify, laugh, and create music. Some folks see this exuberance and say it's an indicator of poverty, of being low class. Maybe. I was 4 when my mother, who was 26, was pregnant with my sister, and her parents died, and she took in all of her sisters. They ranged in age from 9 to 17. Our flat, which had been relatively quiet, became a bustling transit station. There was always someone coming or going, screen doors slapping shut, folks calling to each other from the front porch or through open doors, and teenagers arguing about who had borrowed what and didn't return a lipstick, a blouse, or a pen. The telephone was always ringing and the television or radio blasting as teenage aunties straightened each other's hair or polished fingernails. Daddy didn't stay long. Down to one parent, I was left to compete for attention in a house full of vibrant young women. My aunts individually weren't especially loud, but family, especially a house full of women, is competitive. At meals, we talked over each other, more often than not agreeably, laughing about how some hayseed was mooning over one of them, or how one of them had tried to even out her bangs and ended up with a lopsided quarter-inch bit of fringe. Often they rehashed earlier arguments, the volume of their voices escalating as each tried to outtalk the other. Mother would shush them when they got too loud, but mostly she laughed with them. So loud was good. It commanded attention. It was a way of expressing love, of making a point, of winning, of being a part of something warm. Being mealy-mouthed got you nothing. If you wanted something, you had to say it loud enough so that people looked at you. Then you had to speak with conviction, like it mattered, like what you had to say was important. Although a child, I had to lose the wine and speak up. This wasn't conscious. It was born of necessity, and I was simply imitating my elders. Okay. Could you hear me?
Absolutely. Excellent. And know that when we discuss your section, I am discussing your section as a whole because there are lots of pieces that we've got to pull out. Yeah. So excellent job. But it's meaty. It's meaty. So we're going to absolutely get into the meat of it.
Okay.
Dr. Omni?
Thank you, Queen. I appreciate you. Before I start reading, I want to go back to the term eco-spiritualist. My journey into eco-spirituality started in 2016. And to be specific, it probably started on March 31st, 2016 at 10:15 a.m. I saw a cardinal outside of the window. The cardinal was walking on the ground, and I had never seen a cardinal on the ground before. I'm used to birds flying. But 5 minutes later, I realized that cardinal was on the ground to welcome my mama to the other side. My mama took her final breath at 10:20 a.m. on March 31st, 2016, from a 26-year battle with cancer. I didn't have the language at that time to realize that I was getting into eco-spirituality, but I knew that that was the defining moment. It was a relationship with a cardinal. Fast forward to June 1st of 2020, my husband and I moved halfway across the country during the pandemic from Kansas to Florida. We're currently in Tallahassee. And I'm a hugger. Hey, I'm a hugger. And I love community. But in 2020, and then uprooting myself from my hometown, I didn't know anybody here. So my first relationship in Tallahassee was with a tree. And the tree's name was Old Lady. It was a beautiful pine, super tall, beautiful branches. And she and I communed on the daily when I would walk. I would put my hand on her body and I would feel her energy. I could feel like just a special energy and connection to Old Lady. So this was my second go around with eco-spirituality. And when I start to talk to people about that at various conferences and public speaking events, without fail, I would have Black folks come up to me and say, "You too? I'm not crazy." No, you're not. There are different ways in which we can engage in spirituality. So I read this piece to you with the understanding of how I got into the space of eco-spirituality. Divorcing the dominant Black Baptist narrative. I am a Black woman. I traveled to Earth in the vessel of a Black woman as the result of a union with a Black man. I was raised with Black Baptist expectations, but somewhere in those Black spaces, I discovered a different way to experience my Blackness. My mama was raised during a time when church was life. She shared stories about going to church on Sunday, Bible study on Wednesday, choir practice on Saturday. She also shared her reason for a 180-degree departure from the routine of church when she was of the age to do so. She refused to subject my brothers, ranging in age from 16 to 18 years older than me, to the laborious expectations of church. However, when I arrived, she changed her mind and modified her position. Rather than the 3 days, we only had to attend once, and that was Sunday morning service. Every Sunday morning, we would put on our Sunday best and travel to church. Most often, we would enter the church through the center, but there were a few times when running late that we would cut through the nurse's station on the left. No matter the entrance, our seat was always the same. Middle pew, fourth or fifth from the back, left side. The ritual of church was a beautiful experience. However, there was a significant, not so beautiful moment that left an emotional scar that I still carry to this day. In September 1994, while living in St. Louis, Missouri, I became pregnant. Without family or the support of my daughter's father, I moved back home to Topeka, Kansas. After getting situated, it was time to resume the regular practice of church. One Sunday morning, after arriving through the middle doors, I felt the stares. I felt them looking at my stomach, and in my mind, I could hear them say, "Oh no, not our Crystal, not our sweet Crystal." In that moment, I was being ostracized by members of the church for being a pregnant teen and unknowingly plotting a departure from my inherited religion. Over 25 years after the incident, I still hold on to the love of the ritual, but the dislike of the rudeness, the appreciation for the community, but the sadness over the lack of compassion, the memory of my mama, but the unanswered questions about other spiritual practices that were not afforded to me. Several months after Mama took her final breath from a 26-year battle with cancer, March 31st, 2016 at 10:20 a.m., I felt a yearning to breathe life into a spiritual practice that was uniquely mine. It took some time, nearly 2 years, but I was still fearful of what she would think. I did not want to disappoint her, nor did I want to disappoint my dad. It was one thing to not go to church. It was a totally different thing to find a new spiritual practice. But that's what I did. That's what I'm doing. Today, I stand firm in my own creative spiritual practice, a practice that centers me through journal writing. Journal writing. Spiritual journaling is a therapeutic practice that involves clients keeping a written diary of their thoughts, feelings, struggles, questions, and transcendent experiences, as well as their reflections about meaning, purpose, and the sacred in their lives. Marsha Wiggins. Embarking on a journey of spiritual enlightenment led me back to the practice of journal writing. I dabbled throughout the decades, but it wasn't until after my mama passed that I took to this practice as a healing space. In Marsha Wiggins' article, Spiritual Journaling, she gave voice to the process that provided a springboard to my healing. Traditional journaling can be used to aid clients in processing loss and grief. Spiritual journaling can be a vehicle by which clients gain insight into their inner world and connect the spiritual to other aspects of human experience. Taking time to hit pause on the rest of the world, to connect with one's inner world, is a powerful tool of transformation. Without fail, when I honor my practice and listen to my spirit, words flow from my subconscious higher self to inform my conscious being. These messages would be missed if I opted to jump right into my day without taking time to center and ground myself. I boldly say no to the demands of the day before I have a chance to say yes to my needs. Journal writing is one of those needs. My spiritual toolbox is varied, and journal writing is an essential element of my practice. I wish someone would have told me 45 years ago that there was more than one way to experience spirituality, and that being a Black Baptist was only one of those ways. I am still a Black woman. I still travel to earth in the vessel of a Black woman as a result of a union with a Black man. I was still raised with Black Baptist expectations, but somewhere in those Black spaces, I discovered spiritual autonomy. And this is the permission that I grant to each of you. Ashe.
Amen. Ashe and amen. Thank you so much, Dr. Omni.
Thank you.
Amen. And last but, of course, certainly not least, Margaret Scott.
Yes, I'm sorry that I have lost the video. I've been struggling to try to get it back and I can't. So you'll just have to hear me without seeing me. I hope that's okay.
We can imagine you.
Good. Should I do a little description?
Only if you want to.
Okay, so the piece that I'm sharing is one that I wrote back in 2015 when I was enrolled in a certificate course, guided autobiography. And that course involves having participants write on a topic, a given topic each week. And the assignment is always to write 2 pages. And in fact, the subtitle of the course is Guided Autobiography. Write your autobiography 2 pages at a time. So it's like 2 pages each week. So my piece was done under the topic of health. Other topics are things like career, money, whatever. But this particular piece came out of the topic of health. It's called A Girl Gets Sick of a Rose. It all started last fall. Shortly after my 67th birthday, I caught a glimpse of my face in the mirror. There, staring back at me, was a face that was beginning to not look like mine. The upper face and forehead looked familiar, except that there was a short but deep trench above the nose, between the eyebrows. The area around the mouth and nose was especially telling. There were deep, asymmetrical furrows on either side of the lower face, extending downward from the cheeks toward the chin. The mouth itself was framed by parentheses, and there were short, fine lines where the bottom end of the furrows trailed off. These shorter, finer lines were aggregating and threatening to converge on the chin. What was happening? The answer, of course, was that, like my fellow baby boomers, as well as the rest of humanity, I am not immune to aging. But why facial lines as a visual representation of the aging process, I wondered. Perhaps it is because lines are like stories, revealing the twists and turns of the plot of one's life. In geometry, a line extends in both directions infinitely. Where did my lines come from? And where were they going? I'm afraid to hazard a guess about where the lines might be going, but I have definite ideas about where the lines came from. Some of the lines came from years of squinting due to poor eyesight, now complicated by glaucoma and cataracts. Some of the lines came from years of slouching at desks, reading, doing research, and writing papers. Some of the lines came from the uncertainty and anxiety of living with not one, but two autoimmune disorders. No doubt, some of the lines have appeared, well, just because. In his book, Telling the Stories of Life through guided autobiography groups, Dr. James Barron includes this Indian proverb: everyone is a house with 4 rooms: a physical room, a mental room, an emotional room, and a spiritual room. I now understand that most of my life has been spent in my mental room, catering to my left brain needs and proclivities. Consequently, I have reaped the dubious reward of chronic health issues stemming from an inability or an unwillingness to spend sufficient time in my physical, emotional, and spiritual rooms. At Unity Church a few weeks ago, I heard a message that underscores my need for a mid-course correction. It seems a truth seeker had gone to a shaman asking to be healed. The shaman asked the seeker 4 questions. Did you sing today? Did you dance today? Did you tell any stories today? Did you experience any silence today? As I struggle to stay the course, I am learning to ask myself the shaman's questions each day. If I answer in the negative, I know it is time to sing or dance or tell stories or go to my quiet place. In 1963, Gwendolyn Brooks published a poem titled A Song in the Front Yard, in which the protagonist sees the front yard as a known and safe place. Along with the shaman's 4 questions, I have also learned to ask myself, what awaits me in the forbidden and unseen corners of the backyard today? Because, after all, a girl gets sick of a rose.
Absolutely outstanding. Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
The reading, excellent. What I noticed is that Esperanza and Scott both reference the same poem from Gwendolyn Brooks.
Mm-hmm.
And so after I saw it the second time, actually, I thought I'd made a mistake because I have it in my notes for both readings. And then I said, wait a minute, it's in both. So let's hear Gwendolyn Brooks, A Song in the Front Yard. I've stayed in the front yard all my life. I want to peek at the back where it's rough and untended and hungry weed grows. A girl gets sick of a rose. I want to go in the backyard now and maybe down the alley to where the charity children play. I want a good time today. They do some wonderful things. They have some wonderful fun. My mother sneers, but I say it's fine. How they don't have to go in at 8:45. My mother, she tells me that Johnny May will grow up to be a bad woman, that George will be taken to jail soon or late. On account of last winter, he sold our back gate. But I say it's fine. Honest, I do. And I'd like to be a bad woman too and wear the brave stockings of night black lace and strut down the streets with paint on my face. That is Gwendolyn Brooks in 1963, who wants to be a backyard woman, a bad woman, a brave woman, a strutting woman. And so I think that that is our central kind of idea here, the way in which we are pushing back against the narratives that have sought to define us by engaging in alternative or alternate forms of spirituality, that we're doing things that people didn't expect us to do. So I want to open up with a question first for Olivia Brown. So you talk about spirituality and the same spirituality practiced by both the oppressor and the oppressed. So I wonder if you could imagine a way in which spirituality responds to violence. What do you think that answer might be to find that reconciliation in the soul? How does spirituality respond to violence? Or how should it?
I think to start, I think for me, spirituality responding to violence is personal, but it's also communal.
Mm,
I have found a lot of like joy and happiness in practicing spirituality. It, I go to church, I want to say. I read tarot, but I also go to church
mm,
with some people who I have trust and communities that I've built in Chicago since I've moved. And I think as we are responding to political violence right now in this moment, there are things
mm-hmm,
I'm responsible to myself for, right? I have to make sure that I'm good. But when I show up in communal spaces, like we work together, we practice faith together. We like, yeah, we do all types of things together to practice spirituality in reaction to violence. And I think ultimately, like, when I think about the future and my bio talks about living your radicalized self into existence. When I think about what that means for our community, I think it's going to require a lot of us to show up and
mm,
do spirit and be spirit in one
mm.
way or another, and do that together and often. And I think for me, yeah, that's been the biggest thing is being able to create a practice for myself and then taking that practice into a group of people who also have built something for themselves.
I love that. So we do it in community. We heal in community. We practice individually and then come together as a group. I wonder if anyone else also has some insight. So this is going to be a conversation, not just a one-on-one conversation with me and a panelist or contributor, but I want us to kind of create a collective, a community, even here. So if anyone has any suggestions or ideas for ways in which you have seen spirituality or spiritual spaces or places respond to violence against Black bodies, and what are some of the ways that they have done that? So, as we're thinking, and you can go ahead, raise your hand or come off mute, however it is that appeals to you. And that is not just the panelists, but that is everyone in the room. But I think about there's a church that I watch on YouTube, and the pastor mentioned another church in the DC area that apparently won the logo of the hate group, the Proud Boys. I think they won it in a lawsuit. And so the Proud Boys have been trying to get their logo back. But so the church has to prove that they're using the logo in order to keep it. So the church has now taken the logo and created shirts that highlight Black spirituality and this particular church as a way to push back against the Proud Boys to reclaim what would have been used to harm us and instead will be used to enrich the church. And so I think that that's a good example for me of how spirituality can push back against violence. That it's not just that we protest in the streets, that it's not just that we march, but that we also do something tangible and economic.
If I can just piggyback and say something,
Absolutely.
because I think that this whole movement, and I'm sure you've been seeing it on the internet, where Black women are urging uh, other Black women to stay out of the fracas or whatever that's going on. And I think that a part of that has to do with the fact that we have to take care of ourselves, our spiritual, our physical selves, before we can do anything else. Okay. So I think that a part of that spirituality
Mm-hmm.
is taking hold of ourselves and moving through the violence that's happening around us. And I think that what's happening with regard to the legislation and so forth is violence. That is the type
Absolutely
of
violent.
violence that will affect us for generations to come. But before us to continue, to continue
Mm-hmm.
to exist, to continue to
Mm-hmm.
thrive, we have to first take care of ourselves, and we have to fortify ourselves before we can fortify others. And I think that's a very spiritual thing. That's all I had to say.
Amen. Thank you for that. I see, Margaret, you've come off mute.
I can't.
I hear you.
So I'm not muted?
No, ma'am. Did you want to be?
No. I just feel so disoriented because I don't have the video.
Do you see the video icon?
No,
Okay.
it's all gone.
Oh no.
Yeah. All I have is just a blank screen. And I'm
I'm so
afraid,
sorry.
yeah, and I don't want to go out because I may not be able to get back in.
That's fair. You know, it's interesting that I'm not jumping, but it's interesting that your narrative is about your face and the description of your face and the lines of your face. And then when it's time for you to read about it, the
And
camera glitches.
you can't even see the lines.
But the lines tell so much of the story, though, of where you've been, how you've experienced life, how we've survived life. And I think what Esperanza is kind of hitting on is the way in which we've survived. And so I've heard a familiar refrain in all of the sermons that I've been hearing here lately. And so many of them are coming back to, but we've survived worse. That there was once a time when there was no DEI because they didn't believe that we deserved to be included, that we deserved equity, that diversity was a problem. Diversity was in fact illegal. And yet we still survived. We were able to create HBCUs. We were able to create thriving Black businesses and thriving Black communities, even with worse people in the White House than the person who currently lives in the White House.
And that should be
It
a
just
lesson.
feels, go ahead.
That should be a lesson that yes, we have survived. We've survived some horrendous things,
Mhm.
but we will prevail. This too shall pass. Shall pass.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And no matter how funky it gets,
Mhm.
we will continue.
Yes.
You know, my sisters and I talk about the current situation as everybody is doing, and we said, you know, Black folks will survive because we know how to eat sardines.
That's right.
You
That's
know,
right. Absolutely. Beans and rice.
pork and beans and rice. So we're gonna be okay.
You know, the hilarious conversation that I've been having with my circle is that we are having a welcome party for all the people who are new to being hated.
Ah.
Come, join us. We have refreshments. We've been here for generations, right?
Mhm,
And so,
mhm.
so many people are brand new to this struggle, and Black folks are well versed in what
Well,
this country has always been for us.
mhm.
I I would also like to add that I agree with both of you queens that yes, we will survive, but we also have to be mindful of any anxiety that we currently hold, any
Mm,
worry, any fear, any doubt, because all of those are real emotions. And we
absolutely.
can't just go back to the, oh, we've survived worse.
That's right.
That is an important reality, but the current emotional state that you may be
Absolutely.
in is also worth honoring. So allowing people to still feel worry
Absolutely.
at the same time.
Mhm.
So when you talk about your spiritual practice and how that helps you with combating violence, perhaps it's that breath work.
Mhm.
Perhaps it's that ability to hit pause and allow yourself to cry and let that healing come over you through the water. And that can, in and of itself, just be that therapy.
Mm. Thank you so much for getting us here. Partly because, so I want to respond to a part of what you said, which is having that space to heal and reflect. So there's Black Women's Day of Rest, a Black Woman's Day of Rest, one of those things. Black women are a Black woman. But either way, it's supposed to be March 10th, and Black women are supposed to rest that day. So, and then I saw it on social media because one of my friends shared it with me. No, I saw it posted and then she shared it with me. Long story short, I said, I've been on break since January 20th. In fact, I started November 6th.
Mm.
Okay. That I'm clocked out. Get somebody else to do it.
Mhm.
I'm baking bread. Okay. I'm working in the garden.
All of that. All
That's
of that.
right.
But also to build upon what you said and what Queen Esperanza said in terms of Black women just saying, not today, like we're going to take a rest. This is something that I was talking about in 2018, 2019, when we did public service announcements on WIBW television called Cape Break, that it is time for us to drop that metaphorical stronghold of this cape, because that cape that was supposed to allow us to fly is the very thing that is strangling us. So this is
Jesus.
something that we've been talking about for years now, but finally we're getting to the point where we're doing. And I want to make sure that that seed is planted in everybody here today, that when we get to the other side, that we don't revert back to the overachieving, extra doing. I'm trying not to cuss on this site. I don't know what the rules are.
Go ahead. Use your voice.
Don't be doing all the shit. Just just go ahead and say, not today, Satan. Just say, not
That's
today.
right.
Can I
What
add
did
on
Toni
that?
Morrison teach us? Toni Morrison said, if you want to fly, you got to give up the shit that weighs you down. She was very specific. She didn't say the stuff. She didn't say the things. She didn't say the people. She didn't say the activities. She didn't say the engagements. She said the shit. So all of the things that we are carrying that are waste, that no longer belong to our body because our body has taken what it needs from that and can now send it on, and yet you are still carrying it. So if you want to fly, if you want your cape to be light and not a noose, quite possibly you have to give up some shit because it's weighing you down.
I wanted to
So
say something really
go
quickly.
ahead. Hmm.
Everybody is making me think about why I even wrote this essay and submitted and all of the things. I imagine that y'all feel the same, but I come from a family where, like, when my grandma passed in 2020, everybody came up to her funeral and said, "Oh, well, she took care of everybody." And that's all they had to say about her. She was funny and she was fun and
Mm-hmm.
she played basketball and she did all types of things, but everybody got up there and said she was my caretaker.
Mm-hmm.
And there is value in that. There's honor in
Mm-hmm.
being able to care for someone 100%. But on the other hand, I watched it in like horror almost. So I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't want to watch my mother get to the end of her life, or I don't want to get to
Mm-hmm.
the end of mine. And all I did with myself was take care of everybody and take care of or take on America's problems that I didn't even
That's
make.
right.
And so I just wanted to say that to re-emphasize everything that y'all were saying, and that, like, if we are, and we will get there, because it's what we do. It's in our blood,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we are going to get there, we do need to be taking these moments of pause, reflecting with each other in space like this. But yeah, I wanted to add that.
I love what you said there because I wrote a note and I believe that it was after yours about, yes, because yours is a letter to your grandmother. And so what I wrote was in search of our grandmother's gardens and then disturbing them.
Hmm. I
Because when I think about my own grandmother, and my first book is dedicated to my grandmother because she was a preacher who would not have dared to take a pulpit
mm,
because Black women in her faith tradition did not stand in the pulpit. So this idea of taking what it is that we need from our grandmother's gardens and then tearing up the dirt for the rest. That we are in a disruption season because nothing is like it used to be. And so it's time to even disrupt the narratives that we have internalized about ourselves, about what we can do, about who we can be, and who it is that we're supposed to be. And so what that means is that we take what we need and leave what we don't. And what I have heard over and over again is that each of you all has taken what it is that you need and left the things that you did not. And so, Dr. Omni, and I'm not leaving you, Olivia, but I'm pulling you in, Dr. Omni, that when you talk about showing up in church pregnant and how the church responded to that, Olivia, that's that violence that we're talking about. And I thought about the Black girl who just in January had to stand up in front of a church because she was pregnant and apologize to the church. And the pastor then berated her and said that, and we better not have a baby shower for you.
Oh gosh.
As if the child is also convicted, as we have convicted the child's mother. And it is funny to me, it is hilarious, watch me laugh, that there is never a young man with these young women. That he never has to show up while she stands to have her scarlet letter affixed to her clothing. That she carries the weight of the child and the weight of the shame alone. And so a part of what it is that we need to do is call in our Black men to do some of the work that Black women have been doing. How often does a grandfather die and someone says, and he took care of everybody? My grandfather's funeral, a girl stood up and said that that's her daddy too. Okay. And I didn't know her. That's your what? And so I say that to say, while Black women are carrying all of this weight and wondering why we then have bodies that are affected by the weight that we've carried, because we refuse to put things down, that we refuse to take time to rest in the garden, that we refuse to take time to journal and write, that we refuse to take time to push back on these ideas. That if I have to stand up in front of a church, I'm going to say what it is that's on my heart and not what it is that you expect me to say. That is, where are the men? And that Black women allow the church to treat us so badly, and yet without Black women, there would be no Black church. But we still attend the same churches where our daughters, sisters, mothers, and selves cannot ascend the pulpit. The same churches where we are given the responsibility for the smallest of children, but we can teach them, but we can't teach anyone older. The same churches that will take your money, but not your ministry. And we give them years, generations of dedicated service. And then we die. And they replace us with another Black woman who will do the work we left undone. And so, Esperanza, you talk about your voice and being a loud talking Black woman. And I resonated with this because Black women need to speak even more loudly.
Yeah. You know, one thing, because what you're talking about is trying to overcome generations of training. I mean,
That's
I
right.
know on I don't know, Facebook, this white lady was saying how she told her child if she's lost or something or in trouble to look for a Black woman because they know, that's what she said, to look for a Black woman because they know that we will take care of them because we have taken care of them for so doggone long. Okay. And I'm not making this up. That's what I think. So it's not just the church, it's the world.
That's right.
That's and the thing is, we've been doing it, you know, because we do what we have to do when the need arises. That is not something that you can really just get rid of because it's a part of who we are. I mean, I know it's a part of who I was trained to be coming up, as a teacher, and the things my mother taught me and so forth. It's really hard to just say, okay, I'm going to just do this for me right now.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's really hard. And I think that we're getting towards that, but it's going to take time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I don't know. I don't know how to accelerate that. Do you know what I mean?
One decision at a time, I suppose.
Yeah.
Right? One self-care moment at a time. I told a student last semester, I said, do you realize how stressful you all are? How much you all ask for on any given day? I said, you think that it's you and your one question, except there are 25 of you all. So that's 25 questions. That's 25 emails. That's 25 students coming to office hour. And that's for one class. And I still have to grade your papers and prepare for class. And do you realize that you are stressful? And so she said, no, I didn't. And so later on in the semester, she said, I'm so sorry for being stressful. Thank you for acknowledging that I do more than walk in and talk to you these 50 minutes on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or an hour and 15 minutes, that there is labor that I do every time I interact with you. And so saying what it is that we need, seeing, I've heard people say, oh, I've never seen my mother cry. I've never seen my grandmother cry. But please believe her heart was hurt at some point. Please believe her feelings were hurt at some point. Her body was hurting at some point. So when we start to tell our truth, and that's why I love Dr. Omni's, this idea of journaling as healing, because sometimes the only place that we can tell our truth is to our notes. It's to a piece of paper. And quite possibly maybe in the company of a friend who we trust enough to be vulnerable with. But once we start telling our truth, I think about Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. And Pamela, I see you coming, so go ahead and come off mute and you can follow up right after. But I think about Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, where Pauline Breedlove, who is the maternal character or the opposite maternal character in the text, she gets pregnant and then she goes into the hospital to have her baby. And she overhears the doctor talking about how Black women can give birth without any pain. Oh, they never holler. They never scream. They don't feel anything. They give birth, I think the text says like horses, something like that. And so she says that she made up in her mind at that moment to yell and scream and holler and make all the noise so that she could again push back on the narrative that we are not like y'all. Because yes, we are. Our bodies hurt just like your bodies. Our feelings hurt just like your feelings. And so once we start to walk in that honesty, vulnerability, to say, I hurt, you hurt my feelings, or I can't handle this right now, then maybe folks will start to respect the boundaries that we create because the boundaries are for us. Pamela?
First of all, I want to say thank you for the audience. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of tonight. I didn't quite know what I was registering for, and I still don't quite know because I expected to be home and joining in, but I actually ended up at my daughter's and having what did she tell me? Having hot pot for the first time and try to do that, which is very interactive and engage and listen. But I was able to definitely hear a lot of what was said. And I know that we were recording tonight, so I don't know what the anticipation is of getting the recording and even coming back again, because I felt like the depth of what everyone wrote required for me a little more deep listening and reflecting, because I know I have learned to say that I'm a writer and a photographer, but mine's came through the pain of sandwich generation, being a single parent and having my aging parents at the same time that I was a single parent with children that was only 15 months apart. And it seemed like there would be times when something would go on with my daughter required more attention than my son. So there would be times when something would seem like it would happen for my daughter. At the same time, something was going on with my mother, whether it was good or bad. My daughter, like on one end, she's like they're graduating from high school and going off to college and writing applications and applying for programs. And on the other side, I'm taking care of health issues and stuff with my parents, trying to deal with getting power of attorneys established and all of that. So of course, I'm trying to balance the scales, not taking care of myself. I couldn't tell you what I liked, but I could list all of my, like one time my brother and sister had to take my mom to the doctor. And they called me and asked me a question, and I'm someplace taking care of some business with my children. And my brother was like flabbergasted with the fact that I was able to like rattle off all of my father's medications and most recent appointments and blah, 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 because I was always the one taking them to appointments. But it was like my first 5 writings that I did, which I thought that was all that I was going to write in the world, came at a time when I couldn't even bring myself to cry. I wasn't a writer. And it was like I had gotten a download. The first one I wrote, it was chaos going on in the cafeteria with elementary age children. And it was like I was someplace else. I transported and I wrote. And just even the titles of what I wrote, like My Black Hole and um, living living amongst the dead, and to hear each of you read and share what you shared tonight was coming from such a deep place. And I heard the distinctions clearly between religion and spirituality, how we were handed down the religion of our slave holders. And the fact that some of my writing, I just got finished doing one, and I titled it When the Sun Shone Black. And that was for our people. The sun wasn't shining for us, but we were working in that sun. And we were, maybe 4 or 5 hours off. We were working through the night. But their religion told them that this was okay. Who they're so deep that they would take and create a whole Bible for us so that you would take out anything that alluded to freedom. Once you finally got us to the place where we was able to read, but you adjusted God's Bible to suit your needs.
Do they still not do that now?
Yes, that's what they.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was just like I just heard so much. I wanted y'all to know I was paying attention. I was listening, and I'm just so glad that I signed on, because I was like, at the same time, there's something going on in America too, where another group of us collectively as Blacks are on another call so that we can avoid watching Trump right now. So I had that on my phone. But then when it came time to this, I signed on here.
But isn't the Black woman's life all about managing multiple responsibilities overlapping at the same time and figuring out how to listen with one ear and hear with another?
As I have an earpiece on one ear and have my ear open too.
As much as I appreciate how much technology has allowed us to be in spaces we would not have been, to some extent, I think that it's also disrupted our idea of community and conversation. That I can now be in a Zoom over here and a Zoom over here and watching something over here, and something else is going on in the background. And so we no longer have to be fully present in any place. And I suggest that quite possibly means that we're also missing parts of the conversation. Now, I knew where I would not be tonight, right? Even if I did not have this conversation with you all, that has really blessed my life. But I knew Like I said, I've taken off the next 4 years. I don't even know. I hope that nothing happens to me medically, because I heard that they ask who's the current president, and I will say I don't know,
Oh, right,
because I
right.
don't.
Because you don't want to
Right?
have his name roll
That's
out your
right.
mouth.
That's right.
You don't
I
want them to think
plead
that you
the
don't.
fifth. Okay.
Tell them, ask you something else. Ask me what time it is.
There you go. And so, but that is what self-care looks like. Self-care looks like me saying what I will not engage, while engaging the things that bring me joy. Now, I want to share something funny is, where's a girl gets tired of a rose? Is that Scott? Yes. Now, hilariously, when I read the title, A Girl Gets Tired of a Rose, um, a girl gets sick of a rose. Now, I thought that this was about another kind of rose that the girls order on the internet, and it comes in an unlabeled box.
Dr. Mathis, I might have to write that one. About the
Listen,
other row.
so I was like, let me see what this thing is talking about. And then come to find out that it wasn't about that, but that it still talks about what our responsibility is to our bodies. But it is 9:23 and I want to talk about pleasure. So I'm going to spend this last portion of the conversation talking about pleasure as self-care, because as we create a toolbox that will take us through the next 4 years, and look at what that man who is currently occupying that house where white folks live, look at what he has done in 5 weeks. We still have 3 years, 47 weeks left. I say that to say, what are the ways that you are currently seeking or finding joy, spaces or places that bring you pleasure, that remind you that there is still happiness to be sought and to be manifested in our lives? This question is open. So, if you have something that you would like to share as we put together our joy toolbox, I love Dr. Omni, who talks about a cake break. So, maybe as you're making your list for cake breaks, let's think through some ways that we can find joy and pleasure as self care. So, what are some of the places and spaces? Mm-hmm.
Remember, was it Dr. Chris? Chris, what is her name?
Omni.
Yes. Because when you were talking about your tree, I
Yes,
was
ma'am.
like, yes. When you come to Detroit, I have to take you to meet Lady Detroit, the river. She is so beautiful.
Ooh.
And the thing is, I think that for me, a part of pleasure is enjoying the natural things around us, getting to know them, letting them become a part of me. And as craziness happens in our world, I think it's important that we get to know the natural things. I know here in Detroit, we have a big thing with urban farming. Okay, got a lot of young Black people that have taken over some of the feral land and turned it into farms.
Right.
And they take the produce and they have feasts sometimes, and they invite the neighborhood and feed the homeless and so forth. Sometimes they donate to shelters and so forth. But for me, I think it's important that we begin to appreciate the natural elements around us and become more attuned with those kinds of things. I know it helps me to, break away from this technology, from all this what is it, G5 or whatever we got? I don't even know what it is now. But sometimes it's nice to just get out and away.
Yes.
Appreciate what God has given us.
There you go.
You know?
That's right.
And that really, and I wrote it down. So if I'm in Detroit, I'm looking you up, Queen. So we're gonna have a date in nature. So I would have liked to add to that, and it ties into my dissertation on Black joy in green spaces, that literally, Queen Margaret, with your piece, a girl gets tired of a rose, or is it sick of a rose, tired of a rose?
Sick of a rose.
See, you got me saying tired. Sick of a
Me,
rose.
I know.
I literally purchased a rose bush today. Literally.
Look at that.
My dad told me, we talk on Saturdays at 5 o'clock. He said, for my garden design in the front, I have an arbor. And I said, Dad, do you have any ideas of something that I could grow that would arch over a walkway? He said, get a climbing rose. So I purchased the rose, and I'm not into flowers like that, but I did this in honor of my granny, who was 98 years old and transitioned at the end of last year. So I wanted to have this garden space for her. So that is my place of joy. But metaphorically speaking, and this ties back into eco-spirituality, I've never thought about what it takes to grow roses, that you have to make the hole twice as wide root of the plant that you're putting in it. So that goes back to what Queen Olivia was saying about community, that you go into this space as an individual, but in order to grow, you need to have it twice the size in which you sit. I'm done.
Oh. Oh.
Mic drop.
Yes.
While I'm off mute, I can add to it while I'm here. Someone in the comments said play. I am goofy goober. I love to do things like I am mostly an only child. I say that because I grew up with all 11 of my cousins, and I feel like the youngest of 12, whatever. I am always in my home doing cartwheels in my socks. I'll roller skate in my house, just playing good music just to feel good. I really believe in play and joy as a mechanism for doing spirit work, but also for doing collective work. I think for me also, I like to do work with my hands. That brings me a lot of pleasure. Making something. I thought you were about to say something different, Dr. Ami. I thought you were about to talk about gardening in a more like explicit way, but doing so, it's okay. I love the metaphor still. I love to just work with my hands. I feel like I am also a very cerebral person. Like I think someone else mentioned, like I spend a lot of time in my mental room, and when I work with my hands, it moves the energy from my head into my body. And that is always a thing. And the last thing I'll say, I love to dance in the spirit of like moving your body around. Thankfully, I grew up in Miami, Florida. So anybody who's familiar with South Florida and like the culture of music and dance, like that's how I grew up. That's how I express myself and communicate with other people. But also I'm thankful to live in Chicago right now, and house music has become like the love of my life. I think just hearing myself say that too, I think there's a lot of pleasure to be found in like practicing tradition, whatever that looks like. I love talking about house music because I recognize how all the Black greats who have ever come through Chicago have probably danced to the same music that I have. And I find a lot of joy in that. But yes, I love this question. I love all of the answers so far.
I love that you said practicing tradition. I think that when it comes to the rose bush and gardens and talking loudly, and even our face being partly the face of those who came before us, tradition, that a part of this season is going back to what we used to do, how we got over, remembering how we got over so that we can get over. For my own life, I think a lot about, I've always said I want to be close to the ground as it relates to the life that I live. And what that's meant for me historically is being a vegan and then saying, okay, I want to be a plant-based vegan, and then saying I want to be a close to the ground vegan. So what that now means is that I want to cook all of the food that I eat in my home, including the baking of bread, the making of granola, the preparation of cashew milk or almond milk or whatever else it is, that I want to know that I can sustain myself through the power of these two hands that God has given me. And so, what that also means is going back out to that garden and figuring out how to raise something that we can eat. And that's how we get over. That's how we survive, by working with our hands and remembering that we already have everything that we need inside of us. So because it's 9:32 and we are going to go ahead and kind of move this to a close, what I'd like though is for each of the panelists to give us a 30-second takeaway. So something quick, 30-second takeaway, starting with Olivia, since your face is on my screen right here. So we're going to start with you and then go in order. 30-second takeaway.
Okay, quick clarifying question. 30-second takeaway about our conversation in totality or my piece.
I ain't going to tell you.
Okay, well, if I could leave y'all with anything else, I would say there is God in you. And as you get close to that God that is existing within you already, you become so much more powerful. So I would encourage all of you to get close to the spirit and the ancestor team and whatever it looks like that exists in you already, because that is how that is the light and the life force that you take into community and do all of this amazing work with. And finally, play, have fun, do things that feel good, and only things that feel good. And if I could leave y'all with one more term, Adrienne Marie Brown in Pleasure Activism talks about the orgasmic yes. Follow that yes, follow that pleasure, follow that happy feeling to the other side of the rainbow. And thank y'all for having me.
Amen. Orgasmic, yes. All right. Yes. Esperanza.
The only thing I have to say is something I had to learn, that it's okay to love myself. I mean, that's something I really had to learn, and it's okay to do for me, because it was just hard to learn that, but
yes.
Love yourself.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. Omni.
For my 30-second takeaway, it's a group activity. I ask you to put your hand on your heart, put your hand on your belly. For 30 seconds, we're going to breathe. I put my timer on. I invite you to close your eyes and simply feel your breath in this moment. To inhale deeply through your nose, allowing your chest to rise, allowing your spine to elongate, and let your shoulders drop. As your chin lifts, feel the energy flow through your body. As you exhale, releasing any doubt, any worry, any fear, knowing that you are joy. I send you love and gratitude from Tallahassee, Florida. Thank you. Timer's up.
Oh, I felt like I wasn't finished.
I didn't want to stop after 30, but timer went off.
Thank you so much for that reminder to breathe. And Margaret Scott.
While we wait for Margaret, can I just invite you all that if you come into Philadelphia to reach out? We have one of my good friends, she has the Museum of Black Joy. And we would love to have you, host you, and we do all things with hand in mind, hand and spirit and mind. So we write, we sew, we craft, we create in that space.
Amen.
I'm going to receive that and put that on my calendar. How do I get in contact with you?
My information is in the email. I mean, in
It's in
the
the chat.
chat. Yes. So please feel free to stay in contact. I would love to be back in communication with you all. I appreciate your energy.
Thank you, Queen.
Yes. All right. So Margaret might be experiencing some technical difficulties. So I think we have gotten so much from this time that we've spent together. And I hope that we've been reminded of how fiercely we must protect our peace, our souls, ourselves, our spirits. Amen. Thank you all for coming. Yes. And spending an hour and a half in the middle of the night with a woman you've never met.
But know now so well.
And that
But no
sounds like
announcement.
pleasure. Was that
That
pleasure?
sounds like pleasure. A girl gets sick of a rose.
Okay. I'm going to go after that orgasmic yes. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
night.
you. Yes. Have a good night.
Peace. Ashe.
All right.
Ashe, ashe.
Take care, y'all.
Yes.